nabanggit ko na po na ang National Capital Region ay mapapasailalim po sa GCQ. Magkakaroon po ng pilot dito po sa Metro Manila. The granular lockdown does not have to be an entire barangay. It can be a street, it can be a house, it can be a community. It should be as granular as we can. Magbibigay tayo ng ayuda doon sa mga naka-lockdown. Walang lalabas doon sa mga areas under localized lockdown. Kaya nga po sa tingin natin, magiging mas epektibo ito.
That was Palace spokesman Harry Roque announcing the relaxing of mobility curbs in Metro Manila to GCQ. This comes at a time when the Delta variant is pushing COVID infections in the Philippines to new peaks. Some models now point to cases reaching as much as 30,000 this week.
The easing of restrictions also signals a shift to granular lockdowns set to be piloted in NCR. The move means the country will veer away from regional lockdowns to more targeted restrictions like buildings, streets, or barangays. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Robbie Alampa. You're watching The Big Story. Metro Manila slides back to a less restrictive general community quarantine starting Wednesday as government shifts to a more targeted approach in lockdowns.
Residents are now on wait-and-see mode over the guidelines to this granular lockdown. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro has this big story.
On Wednesday, Metro Manila and several key cities and provinces go back to a relative sense of normalcy as the government begins loosening up quarantine restrictions. The IATF approved the downgrade to general community quarantine for large parts of the country, beginning September 8 until the end of the month. But at the same time, the IATF approved a shift to targeted and focused lockdowns on smaller areas called granular lockdowns.
Magkakaroon po ng pilot dito po sa Metro Manila. At ito po yung tinatawag nga natin na mga localized lockdowns.
Roque says the guidelines for the GCQ will be released later, especially for the new granular lockdowns and the omnibus guidelines approved by the IATF last May 6. The following had been allowed under GCQ. Businesses are allowed 50 to 100% capacity on approval of the DTI, but LGUs are allowed to reduce capacity to a minimum of 50%. Minors and seniors are still not allowed outdoors. Entertainment venues still remain closed, but religious activities and necrological services are allowed up to 30% capacity. Only outdoor non-contact sports and exercises will be allowed, and work from home is still encouraged. It is not yet clear if these would remain in effect for this round of GCQ. The shift to granular lockdowns comes as many businesses teeter on the edge of bankruptcy.
Because we know that with the citywide and the province-wide lockdown, it's now guaranteed that there will be no new cases, and it's not really sustainable in terms of socioeconomically.
With the granular lockdowns, officials are hoping to come down harder on smaller pockets of infection while allowing the economy to thrive in the rest of the country. But the shift to a looser quarantine status has left some experts worried, but the DOH is confident that this can be managed through granular lockdowns.
If we can actually do a very fast and intensified testing, tracing, and isolation of active new cases within probably in less than 48 hours, and the transmission will really go down.
I'm Jacob Lazaro, and we are One News.
To talk more about the capital's return to GCQ, joining us tonight, Dr. Ted Herbosa, Special Advisor to the National Task Force on COVID-19. Dr. Herbosa, welcome to The Big Story.
Thank you, Robbie, and thank you for having me again at The Big Story.
Sir, I think, of course, you've been monitoring how people have been reacting to two things today. One, record high in daily new cases, and then at the same time, it seems incongruent to a lot of people to then hear about an easing of restrictions. What do you tell to people when they say that this doesn't seem to make sense?
Well, I hope I'm not apologetic, but the 22,000 is one of our highest. Our hospitals are full. However, our IATF has decided to de-escalate our response to a more granular lockdown. And granular means like grains, At a smaller level, we will do the lockdown, and that is tied with testing, tracing, and isolation. So I think that's the more important part there, battling it at a smaller level, at the granular level, and making sure that the transmission is stopped at the home, at the street, at the sitio, or at the barangay.
Yes, and in the past days, not only Malacanang but different government agencies and even experts have been saying, pagka granular, mas kaya nating i-manage. But you yourself pointed out, and then Yusek Vega also pointed it out, tracing is gonna be very important here. I'm testing, tracing, ideally within 48 hours, according to Yusek Vega. Where are we when it comes to contact tracing and everything else that needs to happen to make sure that a granular lockdown or any kind of lockdown works?
Well, we now have the knowledge of how to do contact tracing. We fail in the use of such digital apps that make it faster. However, when you do it granular, the digital apps aren't as useful because what you need is really the barangay people who tell you who are the close contacts of this person that tested positive. So I think if they do it by the neighborhood, I think the neighborhood people will point to the people that was in contact with the positive person. Also, that way it is easier to give support to the area that is locked down. I think what I heard from the economic managers is that they will give not cash but food packs. They will put the food in packs, so they'll be delivered to the homes that are affected by the lockdown, so that they will not have to go out. Because if you give money, then they'll have to go out and buy food. So that's counterproductive as well. So the idea really is to contain the transmission and make sure that the increase of numbers does not happen. I think what is going for us is our numbers in vaccination in the NCR. So we're over 50% in terms of people with 2 doses and about 70% for people with at least 1 dose. So I think those two partnering with each other, the vaccination rates and our localized lockdown, I cross my fingers and I do hope
Yes,
they really contain transmission.
Yeah, in terms of speaking of crossing your fingers, as you know, any approach, any strategy, any tactic, any plan of attack is only as strong as the weakest point. And we know that not all barangays are created or running equal. How do we ensure that there is at least a minimal standard with regards to how all these different barangays will be able to carry out granular lockdowns at their levels?
I think that's where the commitment of the Metro Manila mayors really come in. They have been working as a team, working together, helping each other in vaccination. And I'm sure it's an opportunity to actually support each other. I think even before we started to do this granular lockdown, there were many mayors already implementing something similar. When we were in GCQ, certain barangays, they put on extreme lockdown, which is basically just going to be improved with the stricter lockdown that is being recommended to really stave and contain continued transmission of the Delta variant.
Maraming salamat po, Dr. Herbosa. That was Dr. Ted Herbosa. He is Special Advisor to the National Task Force. The country has set another record, another all-time high in daily COVID-19 cases. Tonight's big number is 22,415. That's the number of new COVID-19 cases today, the highest recorded since the start of the pandemic. This also marks the 4th straight day that cases reached more than 20,000. Positivity rate also remains elevated at 28.8%, the highest on record so far. The DOH is also reporting that 76% of ICU beds and 72% of ward beds in hospitals all over the country are now utilized. Health officials have repeatedly said that the surge in cases is being driven by the Delta variant. Today, 279 new Delta cases have been logged. That pushes total infections past 2,000. 5 Delta variant infections were recorded in BARM, which means the Delta variant has already been detected in all regions of the Philippines.
These are the other big stories tonight. Tropical cyclone signal warnings have been raised in several parts of the country as Jolina intensifies into a tropical storm. It's expected to make landfall in Luzon on Thursday. After filing for bankruptcy in the U.S., flag carrier Philippine Airlines is bullish that it can bounce back by year-end. And has the world of tennis found a new star in Fil-Canadian Leylah Fernandez? She enters the quarterfinals of the US Open after pulling off another upset against another champion. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Chen Ho. Some experts and politicians are protesting the government's lifting of the travel ban on at least 10 countries. That move takes effect today.
They say government must learn from its earlier lapses in terms of border control, which could have led to the entry of the Delta variant. Greg Gregorio with this report.
Starting today, the country has lifted the travel moratorium on 10 countries. The curb was earlier imposed to stop the entry of the Delta variant to the country. But as cases rise, driven by the more transmissible variant, many officials can't help but be disappointed with the move, like Vice President Leni Robredo.
Yung ibang bansa nga, napaka-stricto, di ba? Meron lang siyang pasaherong pagdating doon nag-positive. Sinuspend na. Baka ginagawa din natin yon. Pero ganun din ba tayo ka-stricto?
Some senators also aired their disappointment. Senator Nancy Binay said this will weaken our barriers against more COVID-19 variants. Senator Riza Hontiveros echoed this, saying the administration is just toying with airport policies. But Malacanang defended the decision.
Ang ginawa na lang nating classification, yung mga bansang nasa red classification, bawal po pumasok sa Pilipinas. Yung mga bansa na sa green at yellow, ang green po, siyempre po pwede silang pumasok at hanggang 7 araw po ang kanilang quarantine sa facilities, no, sa quarantine facility. Tapos yung mga nasa yellow po, 10 araw po sa mga quarantine facilities at 4 na araw sa kanilang mga tahanan.
Public health advocate Dr. Anthony Liachon said lifting the ban will just bring additional problems to the already alarming COVID-19 situation in the country.
Hindi naman siya life and death situation. Baka dapat in-extend muna yung travel ban to 2 weeks while we do the granular lockdown. Kasi hindi naman foolproof na kahit moderate risk yan, hindi magdadala ng sakit yan.
Case in point, India and Malaysia both take out of the travel ban. The Octa Research Group says the two countries are still seeing a spike in the 7-day average of daily new cases.
We should always have strict implementation of border control so that we don't allow variants of concern or even variants of interest to come in.
More than 2,000 cases of the Delta variant have been detected in the Philippines so far. But for the Health Department, lifting the travel ban is not a cause for concern.
Meron po tayong strict border control kung saan lahat po ng mga dumadating na travelers ay nire-require nating mag-quarantine. Wala po tayong exemption.
For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
The presence of these variants has also resulted in the revision of targets to reach herd immunity. At least 15 million Filipinos are now fully vaccinated against COVID-19 or 13% of the population. But with COVID variants lowering the efficacy of vaccines, government experts are now gunning for 90% of the country to be fully vaccinated in order to reach herd immunity. This is higher than the previous goal of 50 to 60% to achieve population protection. The World Health Organization has goals of its own, though, for countries in battling COVID-19. The WHO is hoping countries would be able to vaccinate at least 10% of their population by end of the month, 40% by end of the year, and 70% of the global population by mid-next year. The agency says reaching these targets would need the support of developed countries under the G20, particularly in ensuring equitable vaccine supply for all.
In other news, the Philippine military is flagging the possibility of airspace intrusion. Aircraft had been detected in our skies, suggesting increasing military activity in the South China Sea. Mobile journalist Stanley Gahete gives us a front seat to the story.
The Philippine Air Force F-50 communicated with an unknown aircraft which was 120 nautical miles off Bolinao, Pangasinan, but there was no response. 4 minutes before the F-50 could make contact, the unknown aircraft changed course and flew away. The Department of National Defense has recorded 400 incursions last year. Some of them may be commercial aircraft accidentally entering Philippine airspace. They also include possible foreign military aircraft. That same day, the F-50s were scrambled. A photographer captured this photo over the skies in Sorsogon of what looked like an RQ-180 military-inspired drone.
Araw-araw natin binabantayan ng ating ipapawid. Alam po natin na ang isang eroplano po ay mabilis na pumapasok kahit saan man niya gustong pumunta.
The incursions may point to the increasing military activity of China and the US in the South China Sea. The Philippines used to be blind to such incursions. This changed after the AFP installed air defense radars in Ilocos, Mindoro, and Palawan. Now it can see all aircraft crisscrossing our skies. The next problem is intercepting them. The F-50 that was scrambled last week is a light fighter jet. The Air Force has 12 of them, all purchased recently from South Korea. The U.S. State Department has approved the sale to the Philippines of more advanced F-16 multi-role fighters. The next question is whether the Philippines has the money to buy them. I am Stanley Gahete and we are One News.
For the big story in sports, Filipino pole vaulter EJ Obiena returned to competition yesterday, bagging the silver medal in the Kamila Skolimowska Memorial 2021 in Chorzów, Poland. Coming off a 10th place finish in the Wanda Diamond League meet in Brussels, Belgium, Obiena bounced back stronger by clearing 5.18 meters to share second place with fellow Olympian Casey Lightfoot of the United States. Obiena tried 5.86 meters once and 5.92 meters twice, but was unable to clear it. The world number 5 is set to compete later this week in the World-class Wanda Diamond League finals in Zurich, Switzerland. The Philippines has been reportedly disqualified from the 2021 FIDE Online Olympiad for violating the rules of play. It was reported that one of the players cheated via engine use. The entire team was punished for the infraction, negating their achievement in pool play. The Philippines finished second overall in Pool A, where only top 3 finishers will advance to the top division. Now, because of the disqualification, teams from Shenzhen, China, and Australia advanced to the top division instead. The National Chess Federation of the Philippines said it will appeal to overturn the decision. Time for another quick break. When we return, your Mabuhay Miles are still valid, even as Philippine Airlines filed for bankruptcy. The flag carrier says operations remain the same as they seek to bounce back by year-end. And Fil-Canadian Leylah Fernandez made a huge comeback to upset another champion in Angelique Kerber. The teen now enters her first Grand Slam quarterfinal.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. Flag carrier Philippine Airlines files for bankruptcy in the United States, serving as an example of just how bad the pandemic has hit the travel sector.
But as early as now, PAL is confident it can turn things around before the end of the year. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez has the front seat to this story.
Philippine Airlines Chapter 11 proceedings in the U.S. are ongoing, but already the airline's executive said they're confident they can exit bankruptcy before 2021 is up. The executive spoke to us from New York, where they will face a judge later this week and defend their proposal.
So once we exit before the end of the year, we're done. We will have a lighter balance sheet, we will have new capital, and our cost structure will be a lot lighter. So we will be done before the end of the year.
Its goal is to get out of some $2 billion in borrowings that it's unable to pay off. PAL does not expect to cut any more jobs beyond the 2,300 that was announced back in March. But it will have to return some 22 aircraft and let go of some long-haul routes.
We will end up with 70 or 71. 70 aircraft, and the 70 aircraft of the 22 aircraft that were returned, a good number of them were wide bodies, Airbuses and Boeings, and a few narrow bodies and one or two turboprops.
Analysts approve of the flag carrier's plan, saying it will ensure the survival of both the airline and the Philippine aviation industry.
And I think once this gets implemented, it's going to signal to the world that the aviation industry of the Philippines is able to bounce back. This is going to be a good template for distressed firms.
Still, PAL doesn't expect to see pre-pandemic travel volumes again until 2024 at the earliest.
We don't foresee demand coming back to pre-pandemic levels until 2024, 2025. And at that point in time, we don't believe we will be at what our size was, so more than 3 billion in revenue.
The airline stresses that nothing will change for customers, and all tickets, travel vouchers, and Mabuhay Miles benefits will continue to be honored. I am Pamela Vasquez and we are One News.
Apart from the travel sector, the COVID-19 pandemic has also had a major impact on the restaurant and food service industry. Now, many had to pivot towards takeout and delivery service, while some had to innovate just to stay afloat. Dale De Vera has a story.
With varying degrees of restrictions in the country, several restaurants have been heavily battered by the pandemic. Many have been forced to adapt, like this pizza house. They have started to create what they call as a delivery and takeout store to keep staff employed while reaching more customers.
Madaling puntahan ng mga customers natin yung stores para sa mga takeout customer. At the same time, para din sa mga delivery naman, yung kahit gabi na pwede pa tayong magpa-deliver.
Some resorted to joining a cloud kitchen or shared kitchens built to prepare food for delivery. This digital shift is a necessary step, says George Wineke, president of the Association of Filipino Franchisers. It cuts costs drastically, but still requires innovation.
Biggest learning natin is innovation. We have also learned how to use the three resources, the most valuable human resources, tatlo yan, na ginamit natin. Because we discovered how to innovate, we have developed our innovation mindset.
This restaurant in Quezon City has taken on that challenge. Customers only need to order via their social media app, and the food will be delivered to their car, dine-in style. Owner Queen Punzal said they constantly need to find ways to attract customers and make them feel like they're still dining out.
My team and I had to come up with a feasible solution that would, sustain or recreate the vibe of dining in. So luckily naman for us, this month, yung August, medyo maulan. They get to enjoy the ramen, the food on the spot.
But for many restaurant operators, they still long for that day when they can once again freely welcome customers without fear of the virus. For News 5, Dale De Vera, we're One News.
As of 5 p.m. today, Jolina has intensified into a tropical storm. It was last spotted 95 kilometers east of Guian, Eastern Samar, packing winds of up to 75 kilometers per hour, gusts of up to 90 kilometers per hour. Pag-asa says it will move northwestward before making landfall over the northern central Luzon by Thursday. The track forecast remains uncertain, but Jolina is expected to exit the Philippine area of responsibility by Friday. Several areas in the Visayas have been placed under signal number 2 That would include several portions of the Samar region. Signal number 1 is meanwhile up in Camarines Sur, Catanduanes, Albay, and Sorsogon, as well as Biliran, several portions of Leyte, and the remaining parts of Samar. Same goes for the Dinagat Islands, Siargao Islands, and Bukas Grande Islands.
For the big story in sports, the next chapter of Kobe Para's basketball career will take place in the land of the rising sun. The high-flying forward is signed with Niigata Albirex Bibi as their Asian player in the upcoming Japan B-League season. Paras becomes the 7th Filipino to join the Japanese B-League system and the 3rd out of the UP program. Niigata, who plays in the first division of the Japanese league, finished with a 16-38 record last season. But with the addition of Paras, Albirex Bibi will have plenty to look forward to as they take on the Kyoto Hanariz in their first match of the season on October 2.
Konnichiwa. Watashi wa Kobe Paras from the Philippines. I want to say thank you to the coaching staff and the boosters for giving me this opportunity. I'm so happy to be a part of this team, and I'm so excited to get there, to meet my new teammates and start my new journey.
All the best to Kobe. Now another big story in sports. The Cinderella run for Fil-Canadian Leylah Fernandez continues at the US Open as she reached her first career Grand Slam quarterfinal. After ousting defending champion Naomi Osaka, Fernandez pulled off another upset, this time over 2016 US Open champ Angelique Kerber at the round of 16. Now on the eve of her 19th birthday, Fernandez came back from a set down against Kerber. With her back against the wall, Fernandez eked out the gutsy second set win in extended fashion. This seemed to shift the momentum to the Fil-Canadian side as she took the winner-take-all third set in dominating fashion. Fernandez will now face seed number 5 Elina Svitolina in the quarterfinals.
Leylah Fernandez, who turns 19 tomorrow.
4-6, 7-6, 6-2. The weather reporter of Canada's Global News in Toronto just made headlines, not for his forecast, but for a visitor's persistent on-cam appearance. Anthony Farnell was describing what weather Canadians will have to face over the last weekend of August in light of Hurricane Ida. Storm then wandered into the shot. As it turned out, Storm was looking for treats. In any case, both of them were professionals. Anthony finished his segment without a hitch. Storm put off his hunger following the day's work.
Yes, Storm is in the building, getting some treats, walking on thin air.
Sakto pa yung pangalan,
Tamang-tama pa yung pangalan, ano? Oo.
Kaya mo ba yun?
Alin?
Pagka dumaan yung mga pets
yung
mo.
kumakahol lang nga ng aso habang nag-zoom tayo, hindi ka na, umiinit na yung ulo ko
I'm preparing for that though. These days, we gotta be prepared for anything.
Oo nga.
But you know, may good news ako narinig kanina, tuwan-tuwa ako. Bukod sa kay Leylah Fernandez, tsaka yung mga sports news natin, masaya ako kasi yung mabuhay yung miles ko. Pwede pa.
Pwede pa, Philip. Di ba? Fly pal, kaya pa yan.
10 years ko inipon yun.
But this is certainly good news for Philippine Airlines. They're really putting up a brave front and a good plan, a strong plan. Let's all hope it works.
And I say that because these days, it counts so much to count your victories. Small victories every single day.
And keep looking forward, keep looking up.
That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Hall. We are One News. Have a good evening.